In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make the Inspire cowl in two different styles. So the crossover front style and then a traditional cowl style as well. So you'll need a 4.5mm hook, some stitch markers and papyrus yarn. To start your cowl, you'll need to have a slip knot on your hook and chain 3. Our first row is a foundation half double crochet row. To do this, yarn over, insert the hook into the third chain where the slip knot is and draw up a loop. So you'll have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over and draw up a loop in the first loop, so that is a chain stitch, still 3 loops on the hook, yarn over and draw through all 3. And that becomes your first foundation half double crochet stitch. I just like to pop a stitch marker into that stitch so I can find it on the way back. And now to make the rest of the foundation stitches, they will follow this process all the way along. So you'll yarn over, insert the hook into that chain stitch that we made. Make sure you go under both of the loops of the chain and draw up a loop. So 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, draw through the first loop to make the chain, yarn over and draw through all 3. So you'll continue that process all the way along. Depending on what size cowl you're making, you may make 122. In this case, we're going to make 130, so we'll make a 31-inch cowl. Once you've finished row 1, you'll have a strip of foundation half double crochet that measures approximately 31 inches. If you don't have that length, you can add a couple of stitches in multiples of 4, or you can reduce them if you find out that it's a little bit too long. So for round 2, we are going to turn our work and we're going to just do regular half double crochets along the entire row. So you'll chain 1, half double crochet into the same stitch and add a stitch marker into the top of that stitch. And then make your half double crochets all the way along. So make your last half double crochet in the marked stitch and you'll have your row of half double crochet finished. You'll need to turn your work and be ready to begin row 3. Row 3 is the star stitch row. It's probably one of my favorite stitches. To make the stars, we will chain 3 and we're going to use these chain stitches and the stitches that are the half double crochets from the previous row to make our stars. So insert the hook into the second chain and draw up a loop into the third chain from the hook, into the base of the chain stitch, so 4 loops on the hook, and then draw up a loop in the next stitch and the next stitch. So at this stage you'll have 6 loops on the hook, yarn over, draw through all of the loops and then chain 1 to finish the star. So you'll have the bottom of the star here. To make the next star and all the rest of the stars along, you will put your hook into the eye of the star, so it's that little gap made by the chain stitch. So you have 2 loops on the hook. Then we'll insert the hook between the last 2 points of the star, so that gap in there. So 3 loops, drop a loop in the last point, so it's that last stitch that we drew up, 4 loops, drop a loop in the next stitch for 5 loops, and then the next stitch after that, so 6 loops, yarn over and draw through all 6 loops and chain 1 to finish that star. If you notice at this point that it's starting to curl up, it could just mean that the tension is a little bit tight, so you can go up to a 5mm hook so that it stays relatively straight as you go. So you'll continue that process for that second star all the way along, using the star eye, the point between the last 2 points, stitch with the last point, and then 2 stitches along. Once you're up to the last stitch, we're going to make a half double crochet using the last 2 points of the previous star and the stitch that has our stitch marker in it. So to do this, instead of yarning over like you would for a traditional half double crochet, just insert the hook between the points and drop a loop, and then insert it into that last stitch, and then make your half double crochet as normal. It just makes a nicer finish than a traditional half double crochet stitch because it leaves quite a gap. And that is the end of row 3. For round 4, we're going to turn our work, and we're going to do another row of half double crochet stitches to make the top of the star, except this time we're going to work into the star eye. So chain 1, half double crochet in the same stitch, and then we will make 2 half double crochets in the star eye, and that is that little gap in there. So if you turn the work over, it's the chain stitch that we made. So you'll make 2 stitches, half double crochets into that 1 stitch, and just make sure you mark that first half double crochet. So you've got your 2 half double crochets in the star eye, then you'll skip that next stitch and then make 2 half double crochets into the next star eye, and you continue that process all the way along, so skipping the stitch between the stars and making 2 half double crochets in the star eye. Once you get to the last stitch, make the half double crochet in the top of the star, which in this case would be the top of the chain 3, and then turn your work, and you'll see that your stars have appeared. For the next row, row 5, we're going to work a whole row of half double crochets. So chain 1, half double crochet in the same stitch, and then make your half double crochets all the way along, making sure you mark that first stitch. Once you finish row 5, your work will look like this. So you've got your stars that are quite pronounced now and your half double crochet row on top. Don't worry if this doesn't look straight, this will be covered up when you do the join. For row 6, you'll turn your work and repeat row 5. So work half double crochet in each stitch along, making sure that you are working with the back of your work facing. At the end of row 6, your work will look like this on the back. So back of the stars and your half double crochet stitches should measure around 5 centimeters in height, which is roughly 2.5 inches. For row 7, you'll turn your work and you'll need to decide how high you want your cowl. So if you'd like it a little bit taller than the 6.5 inches, then you'll repeat row 5 and 6, so doing 2 rows of half double crochet this way, turning and then coming back the other way. It adds about 3/4 of an inch to the height, and overall it'll make it around 8 inches. If you're happy with the 6.5, then we will continue with the pattern. So for row 7, chain 1 and we're going to make a row of single crochet all the way along. And just make sure you mark that first single crochet. Once you finish row 7, we will turn our work, and to begin round 8, must ensure that you're working with the back of the work facing you. And you can tell it's the back because the stars aren't as pronounced. So to do this row, we will chain 2, and we're going to make a double crochet in the same stitch. We will skip the next 2 stitches and double crochet in the 3rd stitch. Then chain 1 and double crochet in the same stitch. So this creates a V stitch. And just make sure you pop a stitch marker into the top of that first double crochet, not the chain stitches. We're going to repeat this V stitch all the way along. So skip 2, double crochet into the 3rd stitch, chain 1 and double crochet again. And you'll see that the V's are starting to appear, so the V stitch and the chain with the 2 skip stitches. If you have a different stitch count than 130 stitches, you may just be skipping the 1 stitch to begin with, then make the V stitch and then continue with the skip 2 and then V stitch into the 3rd, depending on your stitch count. So repeat that V stitch all the way along. And once you finish the last V stitch and you have 3 stitches remaining, you'll make a double crochet into that last stitch and turn your work. So for row 9, we're going to make a double crochet 2 together stitches along the top of the V stitch. So we will chain 2 and double crochet into that same stitch. So for this row, we're only going to work into the top of the double crochets. We will skip the chain stitches in between. So chain 2 and yarn over, and we're going to make our first double crochet 2 together. So work into the top of the double crochet stitch, draw up a loop and draw through 2, yarn over, skip that chain, work into the next double crochet stitch, draw up a loop, draw through 2 loops, and then draw through the 3. So that's giving you your first double crochet 2 together, and then we're going to continue that along. So chain 2, yarn over into the first double crochet, draw through 2, yarn over, skip the chain into the double crochet, draw up a loop, through 2, draw through 3, and chain 2, and you'll start to see that you have the opposite to a V stitch with the gaps in between, and continue that all the way along. And once you get to the last stitch and you've done your chain 2, remove the stitch marker and double crochet into that last stitch, and then turn your work, and you'll see that you have the V stitch that is mirrored against each other for these rows. For the next row, we're going to half double crochet along the top of the double crochet 2 together stitches and also the chain stitches. So chain 1, half double crochet in the same stitch, You have a couple of options for how to do this. For a simple version, just half double crochet 2 into the chain 2 space. Just make sure you mark that first stitch. And then make a half double crochet into the top of that double crochet 2 together, and then you can continue that along. So half double crochet 2 into the space, and then 1 into the top of the double crochet 2 together. For a neater finish, work the half double crochet stitches actually into the chains. So to do this, I go through that back loop and then the normal chain stitch there. So you kind of leave that stitch there and go through both of those, and again there, and then into the top of the double crochet 2 together, and you'll see that it gives a much neater finish. So that's around the chain 2 space, and that's into the chain space. So it adds a little bit of extra texture there. Either way is fine. So you work those half double crochet stitches all the way along. Once you've finished row 10, you'll have most of the cowl finished if you're making a 6.5 inch cowl. From here, it's just a repeat of this section. So you'll make a couple more rows of half double crochet. If you want your cowl to be around 8 inches, you'll repeat row 11 and 12 again, which is just your half double crochet rows. If you are making a cowl that is approximately 10 inches, then you're going to repeat this section again, repeating up to row 27 in the pattern. So to give you an idea of what it looks like, this is the cowl that measures roughly 8. So you have your extra rows of half double crochet between the star stitches. And if you're making a 10-inch cowl, not sure if you can see that properly, but you have the 2 rows of the V-stitch and 3 rows of the star stitches. So continue working the pattern to get to your required height, and then we're going to join the cowl together. To join your cowl, you have 2 options. To begin with, we will make the traditional cowl join, which means it's just one big round cowl. So to do this, you'll need to have the right sides of the cowl facing, and we're going to join along this shorter edge. So right sides facing, you can tell that the right sides have the nice star, and you'll join the yarn into this bottom right corner, and just making sure you work through both sides, chain 1, and then just work a row of slip stitch evenly along the edge. Then you'll turn it inside out. So once you join it and turn it out the right side, then you'll have the cowl that looks like that. To join the cowl, so it has the overlapping front and this pointed section, put the cowl on a flat surface with the middle in front of you, and we're going to overlap these sides. So we want the side that has the end of row 27 on the bottom, and we're going to fold the other end over. So this is the end that has the slip knot from the beginning. It can be a little bit awkward to do this to begin with, so I like to add a stitch marker into that first point, just so that it gives us a little bit of stability, like so. And now we're going to pin the points where they overlap on both sides. So you don't want to stretch this too much. So we'll start with this side. So you want to find a comfortable position along that edge and use the base of this as your guide to put the stitches into. So we're going to use a stitch marker, and in that top corner we're going to match that with a corresponding stitch and place a stitch marker, and then find around the midsection and place another stitch marker just to keep it steady. We're going to repeat that along the bottom edge. So again, you'll have the nice foundation row on the top. Don't stretch this too much as you work along. Find a point where it joins. Don't stretch it too much. Pop a stitch marker in that last stitch there. Then find a midpoint and pop a stitch marker in there as well. Okay. So now you'll have a crisscross at the front, and to join this now we'll start at this point here. Insert your hook into both layers, making sure they're neat. You'll chain 1 and single crochet 3 into that point, and then it's a matter of just working single crochets evenly along this bottom edge only. So once you've got your 3 single crochet into that point, we're going to work single crochet stitches all the way along using this back layer as our guide. Try not to do this too tight because we don't want it to kind of pucker as we go. So again, using those back stitches as a guide. It's okay if you work a bit further into this top layer, just finding a comfortable position for the stitch and trying to make sure it is quite even as you go along. So continue working your single crochets along. You will end up with 132 single crochets because you have those extra 2 stitches in that corner, and as you work around then join into that very first single crochet. And once you do that, it will look like this. So you have a really nice even stitch along the top and bottom. From here you can leave it as is, or you can add some tassels, particularly to that point because that's the one that you'll see the most. You can add a fringe by adding around 4 lengths of the papyrus and adding into each of these single crochets along this edge and also along this edge up until the point that it joins. Thanks so much for watching this tutorial.